everybody, welcome to our Symbi Showcase Series event. I'm Helena and I'm so excited for us to talk today about what is the buzz about the science of reading. So first of all, I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Helena. I am a speech and language pathologist and also the educational success lead here at Symbi. So we're running these events once a month and we're talking about a whole wide range of topics. So we'd love for you to come along to as many of them as you're interested in coming to. My background is really involved in the science, particularly of reading, involved with my master's dissertation too. So I'm really excited to be here today. And I'm going to introduce Hayley. So Hayley is our educator and community engagement lead, and she's going to be managing our Q&A today. So I'm going to hand over to her just to explain how that's going to work.
All right, so like she said, my name is Hayley and I am the community engagement lead here at Symbi. And I get to do a bunch of fun events, mostly for kids, but I'm glad I get to hang out with adults today as well. But if I start talking to you like your kids, it's because I'm forgetting who my audience is, but that's okay. Adrienne.
Yeah, so I'm going to introduce Adrienne now, and Adrienne, I feel like all of you know who Adrienne is anyway, but I will introduce her nonetheless. So she is an educator, an author, and she is also the Chief Learning Officer at Simbi. And we're really excited to hear about her journey, learning about the science of reading and explaining more about the history of the reading wars. So Adrienne, it's over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited about this topic. It is a hot topic. It's very controversial. It's very political. It is lots and lots of people talking about this. And so I'm very excited to kind of take you through. This is going to be just a very basic introduction. We don't have a ton of time, but I am excited to kind of explore what I've been learning about it in the last few months and over the year. So as it was mentioned, and many of you already know me, I am a teacher. I've been teaching in the Vancouver School Board for many, many years. I've written several books on reading and writing and present lots of workshops, doing most of my workshops on Zoom right now. And I am a member of the Symbi team, and so excited to be part of this Symbi Showcase series that we've just begun for teachers who are interested in just professional development and possibly working with Symbi. So those are my books that I've written. My new one is on poetry. It's not quite out yet, but I'm very excited about it. And as mentioned, I am part of the Symbi reading platform team. And so I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes very quickly talking very briefly about my role at Symbi. So I am part of this amazing, extraordinary team at the Symbi platform. My role at Symbi includes helping to build the kind of the reading platform curriculum. So we're really looking at focusing our platform on both helping students develop their decoding skills and their comprehension skills. So that's kind of my passion. I'm also involved in the selection of the library books. And for those of you who know me, you know how passionate I am about picture books. And so it's a great part of my job and my role at Symbi is to be on the content team and be helping to select the books. And so we've got a great diverse global library at Symbi. And also there's an original series that we have original authors. So we have a Symbi original author series. So I do some of the writing and some of the editing. So you might find a book, written by me on there. What do I like about Symbi? Well, quite selfishly, I like the fact that I have been able to help support and build the reading platform. So I'm very proud of that. And I'm very proud of the fact that we are a reading platform that supports both students' fluency and decoding skills and comprehension. So that's where my work around reading power has come in. And so on the platform, there's a lot of, strategies that are introduced both for comprehension and for fluency. And I love that it's Vancouver based. I love that it uses proven reading methods, and I've included some articles there on this notion of this reading while listening. So our founder, Aaron Friedland, was dyslexic, and he found that reading while listening was something that really helped him. So he did his work and background in that area. And so that's also part of the Symbi platform. I love that they have highlighted text for children to follow along so that as they're reading, it can help. Amazing, engaging platform with lots of amazing worlds that children can travel through as they're reading on their reading journey, and amazing, diverse global library. And most important for me, what drew me to Symbi from the very, very, very beginning, because I've been with them for about 3 years, is the notion of global impact, which to me is what makes this platform unique to all the other reading platforms. Is students read, narrate stories, and if they wish, they submit their voices to the global library. And then students in developing countries, particularly refugee camps in India and Africa, are then listening to students' voices and their peers. But it's really amazing to connect children and reading through this platform. So that's kind of what makes me, my part of the Symbi, really exciting, is just this notion that reading can be meaningful. Students are reading on the platform, but then they're learning how their voice is making a difference. All students that are reading on Symbi get a weekly impact report, and that tells them how many people around the world listen to their voice that week. And so that's super motivating for them. And it's just such a unique part of this platform. So making reading meaningful. And so this is kind of why I wanted to just share a little bit, because some of you know me as Adrienne and Reading Power and author and teacher, but this is also a really important part of what I do now. And I'm just really proud of it. So I want to share that. But we're here to talk about reading. This is my favorite thing to talk about because I love reading so much. And I've spent many, many years really, really building up an understanding of, for me, my expertise is in comprehension. So first and foremost, I'm going to just start really honestly by saying I am not an expert in the science of reading. Like I'm not. I am like you. I'm interested. I love to learn, and everyone's talking about it. And so 8 months ago, I was thinking like, well, what is this? And so I've spent the last few months really reading about it. But I am likely going to have people in the audience who know far more than I do about this topic. And I kind of put together this presentation so that if you are really a beginner like me 6 months ago, this would have been a great thing for me to watch because it would have given me that insight. And so that's really what this workshop is about, this webinar is about, is just getting a basic understanding so that we can make informed decisions, so we can learn a little bit that might integrate into our classroom practice. But really, we all have the same goal. We all care about our students. We all want them to read better. We all want them to leave our classrooms at the end of the year stronger and more fluent and more passionate readers than when they walked in. And how we get there has many different journeys, many different paths. And science of reading is becoming a very, very strong path to get to that place. So I'm going to premise by saying this is some misconceptions. One misconception I've just cleared up. I'm not an expert. But another misconception, and again, these are things that I actually believed when I started to kind of hear about it. Science of reading is not a program. It's not sort of like something you buy or something that you know, sort of the new shiny object. Science of reading is basically referencing the years and years and years of research into how children read and basically how the brain makes sense of print. So when this reference to science of reading, it's a little misleading because it does, the way people use that term, it does sound a little bit like a program, but it is not a program. It's 50 years of really solid research. And what's interesting to me about education is how long it does take for sound research to filter its way into practice, because it does. It takes a while. And I think all of a sudden, this research is now kind of bubbling to the surface, and we're looking at kind of application of the research. But it's not new. And this is what's a really kind of strange thing about the science of reading, is everyone's talking about it as if it's this new thing, and it's not new. And it's been around for a long time, and we all know about phonics. We all know about letters and sounds, and some of us have been teaching that way for years and years and never stopped. So in that respect, it's not new. And again, just like with any other approach to helping students read, it's not a one size fits all. So we don't want to be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. While some people have very strong opinions about why it's important and possibly why it's not, there's two different camps on this. Definitely, there's some strong opinions out there. And this webinar is just to get us more informed and kind of help us to make these decisions about our practice in a more kind of a more informed way. So let's start with reading skills. And let's start with really basically, what is it that when we talk about learning to read, and we talk about teaching reading, and we talk about reading proficiency, what is that? What does that actually mean? And we look at reading skills in these two branches. We have the code and we have the comprehension. And code is the ability to read the words that are in front of us, and then the comprehension is the integrating meaning and constructing meaning from that. So we have these two branches of reading. In my work, when I talk about reading and I talk about proficiency, I refer to these two parts of reading with students. I call it book reading and brain reading. And when we use that language with children, it's easier for them to understand when we talk about what does good reading look like, or what do good readers do? They're doing two things. They're doing their book reading, and then they're doing their brain reading. The book reading is what we have in the book, the words and the pictures, and the brain reading is what's going on in our heads to make sense of the words. So this is how I talk to students about what is reading. What does it look like? It's these two things going on at the same time. But when we're learning to read, sometimes we focus on the book reading skills, and other times we focus on the brain reading skills. And that's kind of the way that when I'm teaching students to read, it's about building this notion of, this is a bit metacognition, but it's really helping kids understand what both of these coming together is what a reader does. So if we look carefully at book reading and brain reading, and we break it down into actual specific strategies and skills, it can break down into very specifics like phonological awareness and phonics and fluency, sound out strategies. And then for the metacognition, we've got the thinking and constructing meaning and all of those strategies for making sense of the text. So for those of you who know my work, it really focused on, on the brain reading. So comprehension, that's my area of expertise. And back in the day, comprehension was answering questions, but we all know that answering questions isn't actually helping students develop metacognition and learning how to construct meaning, and there's no teaching involved. And so when I became a teacher, this is how I taught comprehension, because that's how I grew up, answering a bunch of questions, literal questions. But the big shift happened, and it's so interesting to think back on, this occurring in our schools and it was all about the research. The research came out. David Pearson had this huge research study that really started to recognize that doing comprehension questions is actually not helping kids understand text. It's helping them answer a literal question, but it's not helping them construct meaning. So there was this shift in our, in the way that we looked at comprehension to introduce this notion of kind of brain reading. And this is where my work really focused on. And my book, Reading Power, was all about helping kids make sense of the text. So that's sort of one part of reading. But in David Pearson's research, and he says, no matter how important code is, it's not the point of reading. So comprehension had this huge emphasis, and it became kind of a really strong focus in our classroom and in our practice and in our reading programs. But now let's look at book reading. Now let's look at the code, because that's really where all the buzz is about right now. It's almost like comprehension, we've done that, we know connecting, yeah, our kids know all those. And now all of a sudden there's a revisit and a kind of, let's look at the code now, because we've got kids that are strongly, strong in the comprehension, but we've got lots of them that aren't able to decode yet. So there's this really strong focus on book reading. And the question is, what is the best way to teach children to read? That's it. That's the question. And do I have the answer? No. And am I here to promote one over another? No. I have my opinions about reading, but this is, again, just to kind of explore this. Now, I will say one thing about teaching grade 1, and I've felt this for a long time. I think grade 1 teachers have probably the greatest responsibility in all the grades because of this. And because reading instruction really, really begins in K. And I'm sort of diminishing the emphasis of kindergarten teachers, but grade 1 is kind of when it happens. And I've always felt that grade 1 teachers need 1 extra year of university training, and they should be paid more. Like that, if I was designing like a university program, that's what I would do, because it's such a crucial year. And there's so much that can go well, and then so much that can get missed. And so this question is so relevant, and it's so important. And I'm not saying that reading instruction doesn't happen in other grades. It does. It happens in every teacher is a reading teacher. We all should think that way. But this reading wars, what I'm going to talk about now, and this kind of debate over the right way to teach reading, I just find the whole thing so fascinating. So for me, when I was sort of on this journey of exploration into the science of reading, because like many of you possibly who joined this webinar didn't have a background, like I had no background in it. And so I was really interested. And so in order, I think, for us to understand it's helpful to kind of look back in time over what we call the reading wars, and also just kind of the trends that have happened. And I've been teaching a long time. And so I've been part of this pendulum swing, and I've been part of, the great debate on how to teach reading. But if we go back to when I was, now I'm really embarrassing and aging myself, but when I learned to read, I didn't know this at the time, but when I learned to read, when I was reading about this, I was being taught how to read with what is called the whole word method. And the whole word method is giving children a certain set of sight words on flashcards, and we memorize the words. And then we were given a basal reader, and we would read the page connected to those exact words. So every single word we memorized would be in some form on the sentence. So this is Janet, this is John, see Janet run, see John run, go Janet, run, 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 go John, run, run, run. And so what's interesting about this is, like, I remember these books, like I remember them, and I remember feeling quite like a reader. Like I felt like a reader because I was reading the words. Okay, so this method is in full swing. It's going. This is how teachers are teaching reading. I still remember, like, the flashcards, right? The teacher would have these flashcards. But then over time, questions start coming up. Is this actually working? Is this actually teaching reading? And there was a lot of questions around sort of the contrived language. This isn't really how, this isn't real reading. It's just memorizing words and then reading those memorized words in a different order. The other controversy that came up as I was reading about the whole word method is the very, sort of polarized white mother, father, brother, sister, blonde-haired, blue-eyed characters in all of the stories. So there's like very little, no diversity at all. And so that became something that people started to question. And they also were questioning just the natural language in the books. Like, it was very contrived, and it was really hard to kind of like, it's difficult to go deep with some of these books because it's just so kind of rote. So now comes a new way. Now the wave comes, and it's like, okay, this isn't working. We don't like this. There's too many things going wrong. Let's try something new. And so this was, interestingly enough, when I was going to university. And when I was in teacher training in sort of the late 80s, early 90s, it was all about whole language. And whole language was basically students will learn to read if they're being given real reading experiences. This is not real reading. This is not real reading experiences. This is very contrived. So all of a sudden, then books and the picture book industry went crazy. Like, it went out of, and this is when all these great books started to be written. And the idea was, if we surround our students with great literature, if we read to them, if we immerse them in the joy of language and reading, and focus on meaning, because you can't really focus on meaning with this, focus on meaning, then you will have natural readers. And there was almost like this kind of pushback against phonics during this time. Systematic phonics was kind of like, no, we're not going to do that because it's not how we want our students to learn to read. And so there was some decoding woven in, but it wasn't really part of it was whole language. Okay, so now jump ahead 10, 15 years. And after 10 to 15 years of immersing kids in great books, but not actually teaching them how to read, all of a sudden we realized, well, they don't know how to read. And so what a surprise. If you're not teaching them, they're not going to know. And then there was this kind of like, okay, well, we've got to make some changes. Like, what are we going to do? And so now we enter into balanced literacy. And this has been the method that I have been practicing for probably the latter majority portion of my career. And balanced literacy was all about, because it's still very much in the forefront. So this was where, like, I'm just going to explain to you how this had an impact on me. as a teacher, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but because I'm going through this, I had no clue what level my kids, I had no clue what level my children were reading at. I didn't even know how to assess. Reading assessment was like I didn't even know what that was. And so this was unbelievably enlightening to me. I have these kids in my class and they're all in great, you mean they're not all reading at the same, what? And so this leveled system was remarkably valuable to many teachers who had been using whole language and who suddenly had a deeper understanding of the diverse levels in their class. And then guided reading became a part of, so if all your kids aren't reading at the same level, and we can group them according to their level, then we can target our instruction in small groups. And then the publishing companies, of course, had a heyday because now all of a sudden the level of text and the book room started filling up and all the baggies and then the benchmarking. And I mean, there was so much kind of new when this came out. And here they are, Fontes and Pinnell. Some people think that that's like a term. It's like people. Here they are, Irene Fontes and Gay-Sue Pinnell. They are the pioneers. And now whether or not we agree with it or not, this is just the background. They developed the leveled system. So they developed the system in which we assess our students, give them a level, target that level, and then help move students along. And so for years and years, I've done guided reading with level text and benchmarking and running records, the whole bit. Guided reading was huge for me. It was revolutionary for me, who never really had taught reading. Grouping kids and knowing that this group needs this and this group needs this, and word walls. And so reading was really at the forefront. And there were many positives personally for me. I felt so much more like a real reading teacher, knowing this, grouping according to ability, etc. And so one of the things that was part of the balanced literacy was the way that we taught students how to decode words or read words that they weren't familiar with. So there was word walls and high frequency words and sight words as part of the balanced approach, but also there was, what do you do when you get to a word you don't know? And so the cueing system was based on 3 things. When you get to a word you don't know, there's things that you can do to help you as a reader. You can look at the pictures, which is a visual cue. You can look at the actual word and see if there is any recognizable letters, like what's the first letter? Is there a letter that stands out? So you look at the visual, the sort of the structure, pardon me, and then you look at the context. So you say, what does it look like? Pictures, is that going to help me? Any letters, is that going to help me? Meaning, is that going to help me? So here's an example. Here's a level text. Mrs. Cat got her basket. She put some eggs in her basket. So I'm a child in grade 1. I'm reading this. I look at Mrs. Cat got her, and I don't know the word basket. So based on a cueing system, what would the teacher in the guided reading group do? Say, let's look at the picture. Let's look at the letters. And let's think about what this story is about. Okay, so I'm going to look at the pictures. There's a grocery store and the cat, and there's Mrs. Cat. And then I'm going to think about, look at the letters, what's B, and it's got a K. And then I'm going to look at the picture. Well, she's carrying a basket. So I can use my cues and say, Mrs. Cat got her basket. So I read the word. Same with eggs. I don't know eggs, but I'm looking at the pictures and I see that egg, and I kind of put that together, eggs. The question now is that, this is the question, the big is that reading? Is that guessing? And one camp will say it's guessing because they're not actually reading the words. They don't need to, because if you give them a cueing system, they're not necessarily dependent on the code. They don't need to know those letters. They can use the cues to make sense of the text, and they can read the word basket. So this is kind of an important lead in to when I'm going to talk about the science of reading. Keep that question in mind. Is that reading or is that guessing? And one of the things that I will question, like just put out to you, guessing, the word guess to me is kind of like a random. But what we're trying to help students with when we're using the cueing system, at least this is what I believed that I was doing, is I was giving them support so that their guess could be based on their knowledge. It wasn't just a guess. It was bring these things together in order to figure out that word. Okay, but again, the question is that really reading? Because if we take that exact same text and cover up the visuals, and now Mrs. Cat got her, I have no context and I have no visual. I do have the letters there so I can look at B and K, but I've got nothing else to go on. And so this is where the question comes in, because I will tell you, this cueing system worked for many kids, but is that reading? And is that helping them if they don't have any visuals? And this is where all of a sudden there started to be some questioning around, are we doing the best that we can do to help our students with the book reading, with the decoding? And so if our answer is maybe, I'm not sure if that's actually reading or if it's guessing. And I don't know that answer. I don't, but it's an interesting one to kind of think about. So here comes the science, which I did not know and I find super fascinating. And I was making a connection. There's my little connection for you. I was making a connection because this is where I don't have a strong background, but I found this really interesting. When you look at a word as a whole, connect it to a visual image, like in the cueing system, what happens to that word, the word fish, is it goes into your short-term memory. Okay, so goes in. If you see the word again, you're not necessarily going to know it. And in addition, if you see it in another form, like fishing or fishermen, there's going to be no connection there at all. Okay, so my connection to this is I was thinking about when I was in university and I used to study for exams, and I would literally memorize a bunch of recipe cards and like go through them over and over and over again and walk into the exam and then spew it all out on the paper and walk out. And then pretty much after 5 minutes, it would all go. All of it would disappear. Like my friend would say, "Oh, what was your exam about?" I have no idea. So when I was reading about this, I was thinking, well, that's so interesting, because those words just sit in your short-term memory and then you can't retrieve them again. So this science of reading is all about what they call orthographic mapping. And orthographic mapping is not looking at the word as a whole, but breaking it down into little phonemes or sound bites. So you don't look at this word and look at the picture and say fish. You look at this word and you think sh. And when you know that when you have that ability to look at those letters and group them and put that together, fish, that process, scientifically proven, goes into your long-term memory. And it totally makes sense when I read this. Like, it just makes sense. It doesn't just come as a flash and sit in your forefront and then disappear. It becomes so that when you see it again, you can retrieve it, but you can also expand it. You can say fishing, because you're adding more little sound bites to that. And so this is what the science of reading is really based on, is the brain taking these small little bits and sounds and putting them together so that it sits in your long-term memory, so that when you see that in another word, you know it, as opposed to if you see the word fish in another book without the picture, you're not going to know it.
Adrienne,
so,
can I pitch in there too? I was going to
absolutely, and
you knew I would. You knew I would.
But you know what? You actually had helped me, because I did add the little bit about fisherman and fishing. I hope you were impressed.
I'm very impressed.
Okay.
This is my jam, all of this. So the thing I was going to add is the orthographic mapping is really important. So the f and the I and the sh. But what's really cool is when it goes into your longer term memory, it also links up with this semantic information that you know about that word too. So semantics being like, okay, well, a fish, it swims, it's got a tail, it's got a fin. So the way in which you process that language, you're making more connections between your orthographic memory and your orthographic mapping and your semantic mapping too. Which is cool.
See, I didn't know that, because you hadn't told me that little piece.
I was just watching it then thinking, oh, that is a cool thing to add in.
But it is so cool, like that you connect when it goes in your long-term memory, you're connecting it to other things too. Wow, that's so interesting. Thank you for adding that. Please pitch in whenever you want to, because you have far more background than I do. Okay, so orthographic mapping is just in and of itself is a fascinating topic. I've put in a lot of links in this website. In this PowerPoint, and I just wanted to mention, you will all receive a copy of the slides with all these links. They will be sent out likely tomorrow. But if you're interested in specifically orthographic mapping, then I've added just these 2 articles. There's a lot, but I found these helpful when I was trying to understand it. It was more in sort of more layman's terms for me, because it was simplified. So this is really now what we're talking about when we talk about the science of reading. It really is going to that place of, if this cueing system and this idea of guessing isn't working for all kids, then we need to find another way of helping them read. And is guessing reading? And a lot of people say, no, it's not reading. And we need to find a different way. And we need to introduce phonemes and letters and sounds and all of this structured systematic phonics that's going to help increase that ability to have that go into their long-term memory. So basically science of reading focuses on how the brain takes in letters and sounds. And so that's called the orthographic mapping. I've mentioned many of these facts already, wide range of research on how the brain actually makes sense of print. It's not a program. It's not a shiny object, and it's certainly not a one size fits all, because in my years of teaching reading, there is never one way that works for all students. And the thing that I believe in is we need to be responsive. And we need to look at our kids and we need to say, what's going to work for them? Because, cueing works for some kids and not for all, but it worked for some. So we don't want to throw it all away. And we don't want to just kind of go, I'm throwing it all in the dumpster. But really and truly, there's so many good things about this. So I'm all about kind of exploring it all, getting to know it all, and then making informed decisions. But really the two basic parts, strongly, the fundamental basics of learning to read are phonemic awareness and phonics. So phonemic awareness is the sounds and the sounds in spoken words, and then the phonics is the letter sound correspondence. And I found this quite interesting too. So reading recovery and Orton Gillingham, interestingly enough, reading recovery and Orton Gillingham have been around for a long time, were used for those students who didn't learn to read with, the balanced literacy approach. So it was so interesting for me is that this was using what the science of reading is based on, and the phonemic and the structured phonics was given to the kids that weren't reading in this way. And so it was more used as an intervention for children who weren't able to read. But the science of reading looks at a structured phonics, systematic phonics approach as the preventative for not having any kids fall behind, sort of for all students. So I just kind of found that an interesting angle to look, that it's no longer is this structured phonics just being given to the kids who can't read in this way, is kind of being given to all the kids. So that I found that interesting. But what I also learned is when I was reading about science of reading, I was thinking, oh, it's just the structured phonics, but it's not. It's actually very well aligned with, it's not just the structured phonics, phonological awareness and phonics, it's also fluency, it's also word knowledge, and it's also comprehension. So I really appreciated learning about that, because we can't forget the brain reading, we can't forget the comprehension. And when I first started reading about this, I thought that it was just about the book reading, but it isn't. It's about all these other pieces. But the phonological awareness and the phonics are kind of like at the forefront. Well, I have to go fast now. I've just looked at the time.
And I was going to just say one little thing there. And
yes,
then well,
yes,
Adrienne,
please do.
We also have lots of stuff that's subconsciously going on too, which is part of the science of reading, but isn't something that we necessarily think about when we're teaching. So every word has got these properties. How high frequency is it? How emotional is it? How much can we picture it in our mind? And all of those things speak to how we recognize words too. So those things are involved as well.
All involved in that. So it's not just focusing on that. So I love that. So now what's in the book room? What are the publishing companies all coming out with? Because it's all about the new what's new is Decodables. And again, 8 months ago, I just heard of what's a decodable. I'd be asking my friend, what does that mean? And now all of a sudden it's all, I want this. I love this. I love the idea that these are books that don't rely on picture cues, but you teach a structure like the CBC, you might teach short A and as the sequence of phonics. And then there's your short A, text, decodable. So the kids are decoding it, they're reading it. And Pat is up on, and it's funny because these aren't new. They're not new. We've all seen these, but they've kind of been, and now all of a sudden, they're the latest and greatest phase. So those are just an example of that. So I gave you this, which I again found just as in my reading and research, just stages and ages of phonological awareness. So I thought that would be interesting for you to just kind of have a look at rhyming words and syllables. And so basically phonological awareness, there are 3 really important things for phonological awareness, or what we call reading readiness. If a student can rhyme, these are 3 really important things: can rhyme, can understand syllable clapping, and can identify beginning sounds. So in a K1 classroom, these are really important things to be doing. So really quickly, lots of rhyming text in your classroom, lots of read alouds with rhyming text, and pausing and saying, oh, did you hear that word frog? It sounded a lot like log. Let's say that, frog, log. Those two words rhyme. And so you're just kind of modeling. I mean, there's lots of great rhyming, nursery rhymes. And I know there's lots of controversy about Dr. Seuss. And I know he was sort of, there's lots about that. And I don't want to go into it too much, but he was a master of rhyme. I mean, those books were all about rhyming. Syllables, teaching kids how to clap syllables, say the syllable with their word with their hand, and when they hear their breath, lots of syllables, syllable songs. Bippity boppity bumblebee, can you say your name for me? Adrienne, let's clap that. Adrienne, let's whisper it. Adrienne, let's stomp it. Adrienne. I mean, there's just, if you're a primary teacher, you probably don't need any of this, but they're just little things that we can do on a regular basis. Like we're reading a book like Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, and we say coconut. I really like that word. It's got so many different sounds to it. Coconut. Let's clap it. 3, just very intentional kind of seed planting of syllables. Instead of I spy with my little eye, I hear with my little ear something that rhymes with pig. Or I hear with my little ear something that starts with. So sound and rhyming games, really easy. Apples and bananas. The apple and banana song drove me absolutely nuts when my boys were little, because it was just, I like to eat apples and bananas. It was so annoying, but actually it's a really good song because you change the sound. You change the sounds of the words, like apples and bananas and opals and bononos. And it's actually quite funny when the kids are doing it. Read around the room, have labels of things around your classroom. So this is huge. It's so exciting to me. And I know Helena was really excited when she saw it. So instead of a word wall, you have a sound wall, and you have words on, but you group them according to their sound. And also the picture, I love that, the picture of a child or a person like making the sound. So I think this is kind of, quite all the rage now is putting up sound walls to help kids with their, the phoneme group and the mouth of the pronunciation.
I love that teachers are using like the IPA, so some of those symbols too for the vowels. I find it so useful in my own personal practice. So great hearing them come through.
So helpful. I've given you a list of strategies for supporting SOR in your classroom. Most of them I just showed you, but just a couple of them that I wanted to say. So instead of just saying to your students, could everyone please sit down? You would say, could everyone please sit down? And then you don't need to explain it, but just kind of every once in a while, break the word into sound. And the other one that's really fun is choose a letter and then say, what would everyone's name be if it started with that letter? Let's try the letter B. My name would be Badrian. What would your name be? And so you're interacting with, these games in a way, but, learning letters and sounds and things like that. So I put that up for you. And then systematic phonics programs. Lots of people ask okay, so I want to do SOR. How do I get started? And there's lots of different programs out there. I think the 3 most popular ones are Heggerty, Jolly Phonics. McCracken Spelling's been around for a long time. So I've listed a few on this slide for you. This is an example of just a structured program, phonics program, kind of broken down. Like the structured systematic phonics of Heggerty, Jolly, and McCracken, honestly, they're very similar. There's some differences in the letter introduction, in the sequence, but primarily they're all based on sort of that similar sequence of phonics knowledge. People to know. Okay, because I didn't know anyone, and there's big names out there when it comes to reading research, brain research connected to reading. So these are a few people that I felt like I kept seeing their names over and over and over again. And if you want to kind of name drop with Science of Reading, these would be the people. And so I've listed some of their books. Like most of these people have written books. And so there's a lot of books on the science of reading, but I wanted to share that with you so that if you wanted to read further, you could. Many of the first, I would say 5 or 6 books on here are quite much into the, like, it's very scientific. It's really looking at the brain research. But I've also included some, yes,
Shifting Balance, I found is quite a, it's down there by Jan Birkins and Carrie Yates. I found that one is a bit less scientific, but still really knowledgeable. So it's a good one.
Exactly. But some diehard SOR people don't like that book because they feel like they don't want it to be as balanced. That's just what I've heard. I read that book in the summer. I loved it. I love it. It's so practical and so really little things you can do. And those are I've included some videos as well that I found useful. There are Facebook groups to join. I've joined them both because I just like to be in on the know. And so Science of Reading, the community is kind of community, but then there's a BC Science of Reading. And I find following that, like, you get lots of articles and lots of information that comes through on those pages. I'm not going to do that. So I just very quickly, just at the end, how is Symbi supporting, you know, SOR and balanced reading? First and foremost, our library is leveled, so you can go in and you know, choose books for your students, or students can choose books. This is not for the levels, not for the students, the levels for the teacher, obviously. But all the books are leveled, so we've got great level text. But I was all about this summer when we were picking books, it was like, we need decodables, we need decodables. And I was going, what's a decodable? Just going, I don't know, but they're popular. Let's get them on. And so there's a lot of decodables also on. So we're trying to have both types of text for our beginning readers. We have lots and lots of rhyming text on Symbi. So I love that. I love poetry, of course. And Ken Nesbitt is one of the most popular children's poets. And he's so funny, and he has such funny poems. He has narrated absolutely almost every single one of his poems onto Symbi, so kids can hear the real poet read all the books. Okay, I'm sort of done, and I feel like I almost went a little bit over time because I was supposed to stop 4 minutes ago, but I went through the last slides quickly. But I know we probably don't have time because there's so many people in this session for us to do a new, but new is kind of my favorite thing, where you sort of say, well, I already knew this, but this was new for me. It's a great strategy to use in your class. But I think we'll just skip that. Maybe you can do a thinking new. But I will tell you, I've learned a lot in the last 6 or 8 months about SOR. I found the whole thing fascinating. I love brain research. I love reading. And so I just encourage you to just, be informed, know what's out there. And I hope that this gave you just a little bit of a glimpse, an overview, and so that you can just, maybe start implementing a few of your own strategies. And I think just awareness of new research, not that it's new, but awareness of research and what's going on in classrooms is important. So that's my end. I have one more slide left after, but we are going to move to Q&A. So ask away.
So there have already throughout our time been some questions coming up in the chat, and I've been trying to categorize them to see the themes and patterns. So if you do have a question, Adrienne, you can stop sharing the screen so that they can.
Oh yes, sorry, thank you so much.
You told me to remind you.
I'll share in a minute.
So if you do have a question, write it in the chat, but make sure that it is set to come to me, because I'm the only one looking at the chat to ask the questions. So if you have questions about either science of reading, about reading in general, or Symbi, or Adrienne, what her favorite animal is, all those things. Not that one, we don't have time for that. But we're going to take about 10 minutes right now to try and answer some questions. There will be more questions than we have time to answer, but we would still love it if you would write your questions so that we can use those to plan for future events as well. So one of the questions or things that is coming up is, for me anyhow, I notice that for me, when best practices are updated to reflect the current research, it is really easy to start to feel overwhelmed and to feel like as teachers, we have been failing our students, that we are now being told that the strategies and resources and approaches that we are using don't work, which leads to feeling like we need to scrap everything that we're doing and start fresh. But without a pause button or a time machine, that's not really practical. So some of the questions Maddie asked and a few other people, Sarah was asking, if we're just getting started on the science of reading journey, what is one book or one video that you would recommend, or you can say more, but that you would recommend to help us right now integrate some science of reading principles into our current literacy structures and current literacy routines? So we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but just trying to slide some in there.
I have two thoughts on that. I'm gonna just address one that I think is really important. That was kind of before the question, and that was that when new things come, we start to feel like we're not doing a good job, and we start to feel like we have been doing it wrong. And I don't, this was not the intention of this session at all. And I don't want teachers to feel that way, because quite frankly, I've used a balanced approach for the last 15 years. And a lot of teachers watching this probably have, and it's not all bad. So I don't think it's right to feel like, you know, I have to start from scratch. I will say that the one I might need to just go and do a quick screen share to find, because I can't remember, is that and then I'll go off it in just a second. So there was, so sorry, I'm going to go back to some of the things. And so science of read. So the first one there, Susan Hall, that was a really great, for me, it was only about 10 minutes. And it really gave me a great kind of overview of just a little like video. So Stanislas Dehaene, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He is a French scientist, and there is a sort of an 11-minute YouTube video of him just talking at a conference. He's speaking at a reading conference, but he really talks about if you're interested in the brain part, then I found that really very interesting. And then shifting the balance. I mean, as I mentioned, I think there's some people who don't like that book, who are really full on science of reading people, but I found that to be an excellent kind of gentle launch, because what they did is they talked about how this is the way we've been doing it for this long. How can we begin to integrate, right? And again, some people won't agree with that approach, but I did find that to be very helpful. So there's my very long, bad answer, but that's my answer.
That's okay. It's hard to narrow down all of the research into one thing to do, but I think
can I just pitch in there? I wonder if I would spend some time thinking about how you can get phonics into your classroom. That would be the one thing that I would say really practically to do. Can you spend some time taking pictures of your kids' mouths and make a sound wall together? What can you do so that you're creating a classroom that, even if you are still using a guided reading approach, that breaks words down a little bit more than that, and really highlights phonological awareness as something that you and your class want to focus on.
And I love that, Helena, that you said that. And that's what I was trying to do with just those little games and rhyming things and I Spy, and just introduce syllable clapping and rhyming text, and just those little things that we can do to begin to really build that phonological awareness.
So another question is about decodables. And right now, a lot of book rooms and stuff are filled with leveled readers and not so much phonics-based readers. But you mentioned that Symbi is building their library of decodables. And some of the questions, there's some questions about Symbi, about how to do things on Symbi and stuff. And one of the questions was wondering how user-friendly it is for young children. So if you have a kindergartner or grade 1, is introducing a new technology going to be something that is ridiculously hard for teachers, or is this something that is something they can simply, that can be added easily? Helena, do you think you can just?
Yeah, I saw that question come through. So I made this very excitingly whilst we were here.
You're amazing.
I could see that come through. So essentially, yes, Symbi is super easy for students, but also for teachers to set up groups. I've had a few messages about, can you set up an account for your class? Yes, you definitely can. But what we've decided to do, because we're really short on time here, is we're going to be hosting like a classroom kickstart event next Tuesday. If anyone's around, we're just going to walk through the platform and what that's like for educators. So if you're around come along. If not, no problem. You can email me any of your questions. But yeah, I just saw a lot of that coming through. So come see me next Tuesday.
Thank you, Helena. So we're going to try and wrap up, but there are some really good questions, and there's a few that are about sight words, and then other questions about, well, kids have been learning to read this way, so what about them? Because I know like some kids' brains can read with memorization and are really good they can do it, and they are reading that way, and they haven't needed the phonics, but we know from what you were saying that starting with the basis of phonics is really important. But then we have all these practices of sight words, and how do we, I'm not asking the question, well, sight words, phonics, what do we do? I think is the thing.
Well, I guess, again, I'm going to say, I think we need to look at our kids. We need to, really be responsive. I do think that some kids will learn with the cueing system, with the balance, with the level text, they just learn that way, but some kids won't. So I think it's about integrating, like Helena said, as many sort of phonemic awareness and syllables and clapping, and really build that into your classroom. But I would still do guided reading. I'm still going to introduce kids. Like, you don't want to not say, don't look at the pictures. Don't look at the pictures. Stop looking at the pictures. Don't stop. You're not allowed to. Like, you can't do that. Picture cues help you with reading, like they just do. So, but then I'm going to balance that with maybe some more decodables. So I just think right now, as this is just brimming and starting, for me, it's just being mindful and being kind of responsive to our students. I think that's going to lead me to my last slide.
Can I just say one
great segue? Okay,
is that okay?
Just right.
Well, my one last little point with that being that, totally agree that there are also really benefits for the phonological awareness. Somebody has prompted me to say this, so I'm really grateful for this prompt, on your overall language skills. So your overall expressive verbal language skills, and also your understanding of language. So carry on doing what you're doing, but I love the point about bringing in more of those sound-based things, because that will help just your overall oral language and understanding.
So Adrienne, before you end, just want to ask one more question, because a lot of schools and districts require benchmarking and require using either the FMP system or the PM benchmarks to assess students in their learning. And I think there is huge value in knowing where your students are at. Are there resources that you are aware of that are helpful for assessing where students are at in terms of their phonics, their phonological awareness and those sorts of things?
Yes. I'm so excited. I can actually answer that and it's on here, and it was on the slide, but I didn't talk about because I was so sweating that I was going to run out of time. But give me 1 second. and I will share it. Oh, we're gonna go here, here. Oh, sorry, I missed it. Here we go. On the slide that you will receive that says the systematic phonics programs, these were recommendations of programs that use science of reading, but they are the systematic. On the very bottom of that slide is something called the PASS. And the PASS stands for Phonological Awareness Skills Screener. It was like the most exciting thing when I found that. It's completely free and it is the best. It is exactly what the question was, is there one? So it's a free download and it is the actual assessment. It gives you the check mark sheet and it's scripted. It actually says like, I'm going to say 2 words. Tell me if, like, literally scripted. So I'm so glad I had the answer to that because, you know, I was very excited when I found that. So there's my answer to that question. Now, is there anything else or can I do my last slide? Or should I do it? Okay.
I just want to acknowledge for the people who have asked questions and we haven't gotten to them, or people who have suggested resources, we are going to look at those and I'll send them to Adrienne and make sure that she can look through those and add those to resources that get sent to you as well, because there's been a few of them and I can't get through all of them right now because I'm sure your bellies are rumbling and it's time for dinner. But one of the last questions, it's gone. Nope. Yeah, so there are lots of questions and there were some really good questions about orthographic mapping versus memorization and what to do about high frequency words that are hard to decode and those sorts of things. And I love that people are asking those questions. And I think that the main thing that has been really helpful is that you have been able to spark these questions in us. I find the more I learn about something new, the more questions I have and the less I feel like I actually know. So thank you for making me ask even more questions and filling our brains with even more questions and things to explore. Helena, you had something to say before Adrienne wraps up, I believe.
I think I was just going to thank Adrienne for an amazing talk. I think that's what I was going to say. So I feel like I've learned so much from listening and being able to input too. So that's been amazing. So yeah, I was just going to hand back over to Adrienne for one last finishing word and then dinner.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I, as I said, I'm the, you know, not the expert. I love learning. And so I hope that this gave you, you know, just again, that little bit of a introduction to a really, really important topic, I think. And, you know, we all, here it is. It's not, I don't think it's about winning the war. It's not about being right or being wrong or not doing it well. We all have the same goal. As I said at the beginning, we want our students walking out of our classrooms better readers than when they walked in. And we all have that as our goal. So we shouldn't be, you know, it's not about being right. It's about being informed. So being aware that we have a wide range of readers in our classroom and not one method is going to work for everybody. Being informed about the different methods, being responsive to how your students make sense of print, being respectful of other people's opinions, even if they're different than ours about when it comes to reading, and just reflecting and refining your practice, taking risks, and just making some small changes. Like, I think that's a good beginning. Bring more phonological awareness and phonics into your classroom. It doesn't mean you're throwing everything out. It's just you're adding a little piece. So I'm so grateful to all the people. Like, there was a lot of people that signed up for this. So that tells me that everyone's interested in this and you all care about reading instruction. And so that says a lot about you. So I hope to be part of more of the Symbi Showcase series. And don't forget, if you are interested in just kind of learning a little bit more about Symbi, Helena mentioned that on Tuesday, I believe, there's another, you'll get an information about this, but just to sign up so you can kind of maybe explore the platform. And the Read for Good piece, don't forget, is so great. Okay, I'm done. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate everyone. And thank you to my amazing team that, you know, kind of guided me. Thank you so much for everyone for coming.